Hi, and welcome to another episode of Hot Takes with me, the Silver Fox. Professor Dr. Jason Leitch. It's a title he doesn't really deserve. Number one, he's not a professor. And number two, he's barely a doctor. Rumour has it he failed dentistry 7 times and was the butt of jokes. Having finally become a doctor, not a real one of course, just a dentist, just someone who pulls teeth. He then was advised to become the most highly positioned medical person in Scotland during the pandemic. He, of course, is not an epidemiologist. He's not a virologist. He knows nothing about what he's doing. He's not an expert in public health. But he was the someone who was able to kiss his way up the greasy pole. Many an arse cheek on the way up, and I'm sure a few hand shandies on the way back down. But he found himself in that position and he was told to advise on things. And it turns out that one of the advices he was asked was how to find loopholes and get around the rules that the SNP imposed on everyone else. Rules that they found difficult. They didn't like them. It was incompatible with what they wanted to do, and so they were looking for ways to get out of it. And he, of course, was the man who did. We'll take a look at this hypocritical, two-faced twonk and all the lies he's telling, especially about being a professor. He's not. Here goes. Now, before we get into it, I would ask if you'd be very kind and hit that subscribe button. We're so close to the 10,000, and everything we do, it helps if you hit the subscribe, because we are political. We do get pushed down. They really don't like it. So you can help us and we can get stories like this out. Because Jason Leitch was sitting there and he was asked by Humza Yousaf, how do I go around talking to people inside a building and not have to wear one of those masks? It's very inconvenient. This, of course, is when they were telling other people you had to wear a mask. It subsequently turns out you didn't at all. These masks are worse than useless. But he sort of didn't want to wear one because he didn't like it. And so Leitch gave him all the loopholes. And that's fine, just, do the loopholes. If that's all it took, we should have all been doing it from day one. Anyway, he goes into this. Jason Leitch gave Humza Yousaf advice on how to skirt around the SNP's COVID rules while the FM was Health Secretary. I believe he was the third Health Secretary throughout the crisis. The first one got fired for being incompetent. The second one didn't get fired for being incompetent but should have. And then he came along and sort of rounded off and went, oh, I don't know what I'm doing. So Humza Yousaf was forced to ask for advice on his own COVID rules when he was Health Secretary. And he was informed of a loophole by Jason Leitch, whom we will never ever call Dr. Leitch or Professor Leitch again. He's only a dentist. He's qualified to yank teeth out or drill a hole. He's certainly not qualified to give any kind of medical advice. Certainly nothing to do with virology or epidemiology, and yet that apparently was what he was supposed to be an expert in. The reason, of course, before just a little tangent, the reason, of course, they didn't want an expert virologist or epidemiologist to be their expert, as it were, is because the experts would have told them to do things differently, and they didn't want to do things differently. They wanted to do things their way, which was different, of course, but different from what England was doing. England actually had experts in public health and virology and epidemiology. Scotland didn't want that in case the advice was the same. Got to be different. It's fine if people die, but you've got to be different. Anyway, the message is dated from November the 19th, 2021. 6 months after Mr. Yousaf was appointed as Jean Freeman's replacement. She had already done her job. There were thousands dead by then. And this was when face masks were mandatory inside venues such as pubs and supermarkets. But Mr. Leitch offered him a way round to circumvent these rules and admitted that literally no one follows the regulations. Well, if that's the case and you admit that no one's following them, why even have them? Just get rid of them. No. Control. They needed that control. The National Clinical Director, stupid title for a man with no qualifications, was confronted with the messages at the UK COVID inquiry, where he was grilled by lead counsel Jamie Dawson KC. The lawyer asked why the Scottish Government's then Health Secretary needed to ask for help about the rules that he'd been involved in creating. In the correspondence, Mr. Yousaf said, I know that sitting at a table I don't need my mask, But if I'm standing and talking to folk, I need my mask on. That's right, because the virus knows when you're sitting down. Mr. Leitch responds, officially yes, but literally no one does. Have a drink in your hand at all times, then you're exempt. So if someone comes over and you stand, lift your drink. The First Minister then confirmed that he'd used this loophole before, as he wrote, that's what I've been doing at all the other events I'm at. So all this bullshit and bollocks about wearing a mask, just have a little drink. Then the virus knows you've got a drink in your hand and it won't leap onto other people, apparently. Or some shit like that. These people really are full of it, aren't they? Anyway, he says, we need to clarify the rules with you about face masks. He said he did not know what they were already. He's the one drafting the law and he doesn't know what the rules are when he helped draft it. Does that tell you anything about the complexity of the laws or the stupidity of Humza Yousaf? Or maybe some strange admixture of both. They were overly complex and he is overly stupid. I think we're there, aren't we? I think that's it. I think we've got it. Anyway, Mr. Leitch suggested that there was an ambiguity here that he faced when the country reopened as late as 2021. As social occasions were allowed to restart and events often involved eating. Because obviously the virus knows when you're eating that it's not to attack you. He added that there was some difficulty with the interpretation of mask wearing inside the rooms when you're eating, drinking or moving around. Then he explained that this happened to him when he was approached for a picture, and when he was having his dinner he stood up without a mask on, breaking the rules. He then said he thought Mr. Yousaf's question was legitimate as he was asking precisely that scenario. I just ignored it. I didn't bother. I'm sure most people didn't. Did we give a shit? When it first started, my elderly parents closed shop and I was doing the shopping for them. They didn't want to leave. They were scared. They were frightened into things. And I was doing the shopping and I was putting it in through a window. My mother was spraying it and things like that. Because they were told that this is a very, very bad thing. In the end, and I mean like literally months, 2 months. Let's say they did this for 2 months. In the end, we were just wandering in and out of each other's houses. We were having dinner together. We were having drinks together. We didn't care. And there will never be a lockdown like this again. Not without the army on the street pointing guns at people. And to be even fair then, there's not enough soldiers left, is there? The armed forces are so small now they couldn't do it. So it's a pointless exercise. They'll never come again. People will just ignore it because they went too hard, too fast over something so minor. It was just a heavy flu, ultimately. Mr. Dawson asked him if this advice meant it was not important to speak and act strictly at this time. Mr. Leitch said it wasn't his endeavour to do that, and he created more excuses and saying about eating and drinking on options, and that's it. Basically, it's a load of bullshit that they created in order to control people, to put this message across that we're in charge. It did no good, ultimately. The masks were proved to be not compliant. They were not health and safety compliant masks. They did nothing to stop a virus. It's like trying to stop a swarm of bees through a chain link fence. And it was done simply to put their stamp of control over you. And it will never, ever happen again. But that's just typical of this lot, though, isn't it? Hypocrisy, sneaking, rule breaking. Let's find loopholes. Let's get around the inconvenience of these rules that we imply on other people by having the rules that they don't apply to us. One minister, and I can't remember who it was, UK, Westminster, deigned his car to be an extension of his office so that he didn't have to wear his mask if he was sitting down in his car with his driver. That's how sneaky these bastards are. And that's why it'll never happen again. Anyway, I'm going to round off. We'll come up and we'll finish the video. They take us for fools, but we are not fools. And we know what they're up to. We know what they're like. And it all comes out and it goes to show what a bunch of shady shits these people truly are. Oh, look, we'll bring these rules in to pretend we're doing something, but we'll break them all the time. And there's nothing anyone can do because we're above the law. Well, screw them. Screw them all. I want to see them all go to prison or worse. Anyway, I shall stop that there. We all know what Jason Leitch, a man who failed dentistry 7 times, somehow passed on the 8th, now calls himself a doctor, not really a doctor, and calls himself a professor, not really a professor. It's only an honorary title. You know, shouldn't really be calling yourself a professor. He's only doing it to give himself the huge swinging knob that he needs to impress people with. But we're not impressed because we all know the truth. You're barely a doctor. You're certainly not a professor. Till next time, stay safe, stay well, and I will speak to you later. Bye.